Hi, John Morgan here with the Keep Growing podcast. And in this week's episode, we're going to be talking about a topic that kind of relates to the modern homesteading movement. So let's start off by kind of taking a look at that movement and kind of its underlying principles. So there's really three main points to the modern homesteading movement. And the first thing is living off the grid, not being, tied to local utilities, whether it's power, water, what have you. The other aspect is growing your own food, whether that's a vegetable garden or farm animals like cows, pigs, chickens. And then the other aspect of it is financial stability, being debt-free, and overall being self-reliant. Really, it's technology like solar panels and windmills, and also new understandings of horticultural science that's making the modern homesteading movement possible. So this week, we're going to be talking to a scientist, and he's come up with an interesting term that kind of describes his garden, because it's a little bit more than a garden. So Lee Reich, PhD, is a scientist, an avid farmdener, more than a gardener, but less than a farmer. And he's also a writer, most recently with the book The Ever-Curious Gardener. In addition to providing a year-round harvest of fruits and vegetables, his Farmden provides a testing ground for innovative techniques in soil care, pruning, and growing fruits and vegetables. And it also helps satisfy his educational mandate with workshops and training. Let's get right into the interview and find out more about what a farmden is. My first question is, what is a farmden, and kind of how do you define it?
So I define it, and I can define it since I made up the word. So I get to define it. So I define it as something that's more than a garden but less than a farm. And I defined it only because that's what I had. And when people used to say whether I had a garden, sort of a garden, but it's more than a garden. And then people think I have a farm, and I said it's not really a farm either. So it's somewhere in between.
I think that, especially for my area here, it really applies because a lot of people in our area, it's kind of a more rural / suburban area. So people tend to have larger lots. And I know kind of homesteading has kind of become a thing again. And
Right.
The idea of a farmden really plays into that. So I think it's something that a lot of people can identify with, of growing a little bit bigger than a garden, but not as big as a farm.
Yeah, a lot of people, after I started using the word more, they'd write me. I have a blog, so they'd write to my blog and say, "Oh, yeah, that sounds like what I have. I always wanted a name for it."
Yeah, and mentioning your blog, I was just checking out your latest blog post, and that was another thing that I had down in my notes here is experimentation. Something that I like to do every year is I always try to plant something different that I've never grown before. And you were talking about, and I'm probably going to butcher the name, the Noir de Delhan turnip.
Yeah, right.
My high school French teacher's probably, hope she's not listening.
Yeah, that was one of many things. But some of the experiments were so-called experiments. I used to work for Cornell, so I don't like to throw around the word experiment too flippantly. But
Yeah.
a lot of it doesn't involve things besides just planting new varieties.
Yeah. So, what types of experiments do you do then?
Well, one thing this year, I mean, it's always something more or less, but some of the things this year is there's some research at Cornell on nematodes, beneficial nematodes, and a lot of times you can buy them, and but the problem is when you buy them, they don't overwinter here.
Yeah.
So a researcher at Cornell has sort of extracted from the soil similar species, or maybe it's the same species, of beneficial nematodes that perennialize in the soil and spread. And this could have a lot of implications for a lot of pest problems, insect problems. And so I've gotten some, and I treated the garden and the orchard with it this year, and I'll have to see what happens. And presumably, the nice thing about it, as the years go on, it will they'll spread more and more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. In our industry, in the greenhouse industry, using biocontrols is becoming a big thing, and nematodes are a part of that.
Right, and if nothing else, besides the environmentally sound, it being an environmentally sound approach, it's also beneficial because a lot of times it's a lot easier.
Mm-hmm.
Like for these perennial nematodes, once I treat the soil, and if they do spread, um, I don't have to do anything else.
Yep.
I mean, these are the kinds of things. These nematodes can attack Japanese beetle larvae. They can attack plum curculio. I don't know if you have that down there. We have that a big
Mm.
problem on apples and a lot of common tree fruits. It potentially could attack those larvae, and then those. Now the name's escaping me of the one of those uh, insects that bore into carrots and turnips, a lot of root boring insects. So have implications for that too. So, I hope this works, and it wasn't that much effort, and it would be really nice.
Yep.
And just actually just to show, it's not all about insect control or varieties. Just another thing that I've done that was a very successful experiment last year, and I wrote about this in my blog too. Is so I have a field as part of my farm, and it's sort of a meadow that I mow once a year thoroughly. But during the year, I'll mow it with a scythe, parts of it, and I'll use the mowings for compost or for mulch. And I noticed over the years, what plants grow in the meadow. I don't plant anything deliberately, or pretty much I don't. But what plants grow there is often a function of, the season, what was growing there previously, how often you mow, when you mow. I mean, there's a lot of factors involved. Anyway, the meadow is really nice. A lot of times in the fall, it'll be beautiful with goldenrod, and late summer with bee balm. And, it's nice with the grass and everything. And I had noticed over the past few years that it was getting more and more sort of undesirable, to me at least, woody species like blackberries, autumn olive, multiflora rose. So I thought that probably if I just mowed it more often, maybe for one season, this would encourage grasses again. And I did that last year. I just mowed the whole season long, just as if it was a lawn. And this year, it's unbelievable. It's just like all grasses. I can hardly find any poison. Poison ivy was also coming into it. So it was really, good experiment. And this was, I haven't done that. I've mowed the field once a year for about 20 years, but this is the first time I ever mowed it, all through the season. And if that's what it takes every 20 years, that's not too bad.
That's great news to me, because this year, for the first time, I have a huge section on the west side of my property that I decided not to mow and turn into a field. And I'm kind of planning on doing the same thing, mowing it down this fall and using it for compost.
Well, actually, when I mow it down at the end of the season, the whole field, I mostly just leave it in place to rot down, and it builds up the fertility over time. But I take stuff periodically from parts of it.
Yeah.
But it's sort of interesting because one thing I'm very interested in is sustainability, and so this field could provide fertility for the vegetables, for instance. Once it's composted, made into compost, and the compost is spread on the vegetables. But it takes time. If I just kept doing that every year, it would be like taking nutrients out of the field, and eventually the field would get poor. But if you leave it long enough cycle each time as you remove stuff, plants can actually regenerate the soil and build fertility. So it's just an interesting question, which I don't know the answer to, of how frequently you can mow it and harvest, and when you can get back there when fertility's been restored. Somebody, I went to a talk once. It was sort of funny. Somebody was using this theory to grow vegetables on a small commercial basis, and they build it as grass-fed vegetables.
Mhm. Yeah, it's all about finding that balance
Right,
between using just enough but not taking too much.
right.
That's kind of interesting for me, just starting this process.
Yeah. Well, just watch the plants, see how the plants change. If you start getting some of the woody plants, that might indicate lower fertility, or maybe not. Actually, now that I think about it.
hmm Yeah, this first season, I've just been watching it mainly to see if there's any invasive species, which luckily I haven't really seen anything too invasive.
They will be there. I
Yeah.
guarantee it. I have stilt grass coming in various places, not in the field, other places, and
hmm
garlic mustard. You must have those things down there too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Stilt grass is something that came in the last few years and really came in pretty heavily. I sort of like it though.
Yep. Yeah, something that I'm working into my field area is fruit trees. I'm going to kind of use a small section of it for a fruit orchard. Um, and we were talking before we started recording that I kind of gear this podcast toward beginning gardeners. And a lot of beginning gardeners, I tend to shy away from experimenting or growing fruits. To me, I think it's one of those things that they overlook that they really need to be investing in.
Well, I agree. Just because the quality that you get is so different, so much better if you grow it homegrown. But I think one reason people shy away is because they're afraid of pest problems, and I think that's a well-founded fear if you grow certain fruits. So I think the key is to choose fruits, unless you want to become an expert in pest control, and then always be ready to apply just what's needed at the exact right time.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't want to do that, which most people don't want to do, is grow some fruits that are more pest resistant.
And a lot of times people think of just apples, pears,
Right.
peaches, kind of the main types of fruit that you generally think of. But there's a whole wide range of fruit trees and then also berry bushes and even nuts.
Yeah, berries are generally very easy to grow.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, and also they're much higher quality when you grow them yourself. As far as fruit trees, I always tell people, as far as pest problems, they should stay away from apples, peaches, nectarines, apricots, cherries, plums, and then people say, "Oh, so what can I grow?" So there's a lot of other fruits. First of all, pears are fairly easy among tree fruits.
Mm-hmm.
But then, you have fruits like pawpaws, persimmon, cornelian cherries. There's a whole slew of ones that grow well.
Yeah, and I know like pawpaws and trees like that. I think sometimes a lot of their ease of growing, especially in like our area, is that they were native to this area.
Yeah, yeah. I'd say one of the easiest and most luscious fruits that I grow is American persimmon.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, you plant that, you weed it, keep weeds at bay and water it the first season, and then just come back for 50 years or more and just pick fruit every year without doing anything.
On your and I'll add a link to it in the show notes, but on your YouTube channel,
Mhm.
talk about composting and no-till gardening. Could you kind of talk about kind of your process for no-till gardening?
Yeah, I should point out, self-serving here, that it is all spelled out in a book I wrote called Weedless Gardening,
Mm-hmm.
and that was the main reason that I got into no-till after reading a lot of other books that hinted at this. Um, I wanted to lessen weed problems, and one of the major ways to lessen weed problems is by not tilling. So basically, mine is a four-part system. I never tilled. I actually haven't tilled my vegetable gardens for over 30 years. So I stopped tilling, but you can't just stop tilling and carry on as usual, because you'll end up compacting the soil. And that's one thing that tilling does. One thing positive that tilling does, it avoids makes soil that's compacted looser. So the way I avoided compacting the soil is I made my garden to permanent beds and paths. and then you still get some weeds that will come in by birds will drop seeds and the wind will bring in seeds. So the way I control those, that part of the problem would be just by putting down a mulch of some weed-free organic material every year. This is just to keep the soil covered, and it smothers small seedlings. It has a lot of other benefits too. And then the final thing is, if you are going to water, and I do water my vegetables because they're grown very intensively through a long season, use drip irrigation because this pinpoints the water more and makes it so you're not watering paths or large spaces between plants. And paths, then you're just promoting weed growth there. So you get it's really nice in a dry season, because in a dry season you get much less weeds because they're not getting water anywhere. But so that's basically the system: not till, permanent beds and paths, permanent covering of some weed-free organic material, and drip irrigation if you're going to water. And then the covering that I put over my beds every year is compost, because as I said, I'm also interested in sustainability. So even if you grow organically and you buy organic fertilizers, these are grown somewhere and they have to be hauled, and there's a certain environmental cost for that. So I do make all my own compost, and I put an inch depth over all the beds once a year. And this provides everything besides smothering weeds. It provides everything the plants need for intensive growing 1 year. And that's pretty much the system.
Okay.
And it helps that I really like to make compost too. I make lots and lots of compost.
Yeah, you can never have enough compost.
Well, I think I have enough, but I think you can never have too much.
Yeah. That's something that I just love. And I mean, composting, it's like magic. When you dig down and into a pile and you see this beautiful black compost that you've created.
Yeah, I've done it for a long time, and I'm always amazed. Basically it looks like garbage and comes out just this nice dark material.
Mm-hmm.
And people that would like to use this system, but don't have the means or the time or the inclination to make that much compost, there's a lot of places that sell very high quality compost now, so you can always buy it. It's not super expensive.
Mm-hmm. If people want to get a hold of you online, what's the easiest way to find out more information about you and your books?
I guess if they go to my blog, not my blog, my website, which is www.leereich.com. That's LEEREICH.com.
Again, I'd like to thank Lee for sharing this great information. Check out the show notes at bobsmarket.com/keepgrowing for links to his website and also a video about his no-till gardening system. This week's gardening wisdom comes from the novelist Rick DeMarinis, who writes, "Kings and cabbages go back to compost, but good deeds stay green forever." Until next time, do a good deed, start a compost pile, and keep growing. For questions, comments, or smart remarks, email me at keepgrowing@bobsmarket.com. We're constantly adding new platforms, so if you're a new listener, be sure to give the podcast a review on whatever platform you're listening on, whether it's iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, or others. You can find out more about Bob's Market at bobsmarket.com. The music in this week's episode is by Silent Partner. Copyright 2019, Bob's Market and Greenhouses, Incorporated.